And hi, everyone. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Here we are, live. I'm actually live from New York, and it's not Saturday. It's a Friday. We're going into the weekend. Hi, everybody. We're traveling because, as I've mentioned before, I'm doing a show called The Shine Challenge 2025, and it's playing at the Theater for the New City this weekend through Sunday, and then also next weekend is our third weekend, the final weekend. We've got rave reviews in the Black Press because it's a black theater production, and ironically, isn't that, well, it turns out to be the only kind of acting I've done. I play the white guy in black theater. See, you put enough light on me, and I'm lighter than everyone else. So anyway, it's called the Shine Challenge 2025. Don't miss it. It's about the Titanic. I know you say, I don't know anything about the Titanic, but here's the thing, and this is why it's a black history play. Because when the Titanic sank in 1912, the community, the black community, started telling tall tales about the Titanic because they were happy. The Titanic was a symbol of white supremacy, and it had gone down. Now, these toasts, they call them, took on various forms, and Ishmael Reed took the 44 lines that Langston Hughes had written down and expanded on it and made it a play. It's a courtroom drama. The Shine Challenge 2025, the challenge that Ishmael is putting out there to the community is to keep the oral tradition of the Shine toasts alive. It's actually a pretty interesting play. It's kind of an animal rightsy play too, because I play a witness, the owner of the Titanic, J. Bruce Ismay. I'm a villain, right? And I'm accusing the lone black man on board of sinking the Titanic. Does it sound a little like Donald Trump blaming DEI on the DC air crash? A little bit. I mean, that's the kind of American mindset that this play satirizes. But check it out, Shine Challenge 2025. It's in New York. You don't have to fly to New York, but if you want to see it live, it might be worth your while. It's here through this weekend and then next weekend. You see the information there on the screen if you're watching me on the screen. If not, check out Theater of the New City. It's on First Street or First Avenue and 9th Street in the East Village. All right, so there's the plug for the show. See it. I'm in New York City. But now, during my downtime, people say, well, what do you do during the day, Emil? Well, only in New York do they have open mics for comedy at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I thought, oh, I'll go to a 1 o'clock mic and then hang out for the 3 o'clock. There were like 15 people at each mic. And it was fun. I got to do my stand-up routine, try out some new jokes. But the 1 o'clock was really weird. The 1 o'clock open mic, and it was down in Greenwich Village. A guy comes in. I'm a little early. There's no one there for the mic. This guy comes in, or he comes up to me as we're waiting outside. He says, the mic started. I've never done this. I had a vision. I had to do this. I said, well, what do you mean? Well, you know, what's happening with the world, what's happening with Donald Trump. The only thing I could do is I could do comedy. I said, have you ever done it before? No, I haven't. And so I'm just saying, well, okay, great. Very supportive open mic. Come on in when they open. And the guy was just weird about it. He said, I can't tell you my joke. I can't tell you now out in the street what I'm going to say because I'm gonna do it inside. And so he goes in when the place opens up. 13, 14, 15 comics go in. He's in the back. I'm one of the first. And I set the tone. I'm kind of funny. And then this guy gets up, and he's never done it before. And he doesn't know how to deal with the microphone. Doesn't know how to do anything. He says, if I'm really good, will you let me go beyond 5 minutes? No. I mean, just says all these things that that defy convention, right? And then he says this. He says, well, I'm really upset with what's happening in the world. I hate Donald Trump. And I only have one joke. I only have one joke. And he says, and then he goes off into some tangent and he says, oh, here's my one joke. I'm God. Of course, there's no laughter. There's no punchline. And people say, what the heck is this guy saying? And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the open mic terror, right? That this guy's a shooter. I was an adjunct professor. They give you school shooting drills, right? I'm looking at where am I going to duck? There's like 14 comic bro guys here. We're going to all tackle this guy or something. And I'm just waiting for the sign that says we're in trouble. And I'm looking at his hands. Where is it going in his pocket? Are there any unseemly bulges? And the guy just is like, well, that's a joke. I'm God, and I'm going to change the world. And we clapped him off. He said, if I get another couple of minutes, can I stay? And no. And we clapped him off. He got down. We locked him out, so we were safe. And while the next comic gets up, and we're like relieved that we didn't all get shot by a school shooter, the guy slips a note under the door, and the note says, he says his name. He says, I'm an addict, and some other gobbledygook. And everyone was just sort of mildly traumatized. I guess that's what can happen at an open mic. But it's crazy. But just the fact that he said, I'm doing this because Donald Trump made me do it. That's what got me. Because here on the show, we usually generally talk about, politics and the news and what Donald Trump is making people feel right now. I mean, the Democrats aren't doing anything. If you see yesterday's show, we talk about maybe something that the Democrats might do, but I don't know. I thought we ought to finish off the week with my friend Daniel Phil Gonzalez, Professor Daniel Phil, Asian American Studies, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University, because we weren't done yet yesterday, but so I thought I'd bring on Dan. Hi, Dan. Welcome again to the show. See, I told you that the world is affected by this Trump guy. This open mic, I'm kind of mildly terrorized by that. I'm having post-traumatic stress from the open mic in some way.
Yeah, the good news is you did the right thing. You let him do his thing.
Yeah,
that's okay. You let him do his thing. I think the second thing that you did was you looked for bulges, which I find interesting.
Look for what?
I'm starting to question your sexuality, but it's okay. That's perfectly fine.
We were looking for a punchline. We thought, oh, there's got to be a punchline here.
And well, that was it. I mean, yeah. That was his punchline. It's just not a good one.
Yeah, he says, "I'm God," and then he said before he left, he says, "Look, I'm God, and I'm going to need followers." He said, and we said we clapped him off, and then pushed him out the door and shut the door.
Actually, I think that would have been a better punchline. See, I disagree with you. I'm God was the punchline. What was missing was the setup.
Oh, the setup. You're right. The setup was, Donald Trump. Donald Trump was the setup for him, and his feeling agitated by the world. But look, let's go on.
You're right. You know what? You're right.
But let's go on to because everyone is feeling agitated, and we said this yesterday and I've heard other people say this now, that we have the power, especially when you have a voice. You have your voice, and you have the power of public opinion, of creating public. Is that going to be viable this time around?
To a limited degree. People have their own ability to select what they want to hear, what they want to see, and that's the problem. it's the multiplicity of sources and the need for people to get validation for whatever their perspective, what is. And now
Mhm.
those perspectives, at least on the right, and to a limited extent, a more restricted extent, on the left as
Mhm.
well, but they have become hardened. They have become very, very hardened. And so people essentially have staked themselves in, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
have cemented themselves into position. And they're going to stay that way. The people are not going to accept that Trump is an idiot. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, because he's not. He's if the left keeps saying that he's an idiot, or they don't explain why he's able to do what he's doing in a manner that doesn't insult those people that really believe in him. I don't think it's possible to do that, frankly. Okay, because people who really believe in Trump are going to see anything that is even slightly critical, right? As
Mhm.
as 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 imaginary, left wing extremist radical fantasy. They're able to dismiss everything that's already happened with Trump, and we're talking about a multiplicity of lawsuits, two of which were actually very successful. Okay,
Yeah.
and then other pending lawsuits that was only able to escape because he won election, but people are still blaming the instruments of investigation rather than looking at the fact in order for those investigations to take place, as a prelude, as a preparation, right, for actual
Mhm.
charges being put against them, it
Yeah.
has to go through a grand jury, and the grand juries all over the country, on the East Coast anyway,
Mhm. Yeah.
all over the East Coast said, yeah, there's enough to hold them, including in Florida. So,
Yeah.
as crazy as Florida is, and as deeply red as it is, and how and as fixed as some of the judges, particularly Cannon, I call her Luce.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if her name was actually Luz,
Oh, Lucy.
L-U,
Yeah.
Luz Cannon?
Lucille.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and there she is. Despite
Well.
all of that stuff, they're
Mhm.
still able to dismiss it all, and that
Yeah.
is the central problem. So
Well,
you're going to have
this.
people like this, he's psychologically troubled,
Yeah. But
and
this.
there's going to be people like that that are gonna be motivated by Trump one way or the other, right? In
Well,
this
see.
instance,
Yeah, well, the guy at the open mic was an anti-Trump guy, but he could have
yes,
easily been a pro-Trump guy,
yes, that's
really,
that's what I'm
as
saying.
you were pointing out.
Mhm.
So here we are, we're using our microphone to not necessarily change public opinion, but to inform, and people can
We try.
decide on their
Mhm.
own. But I mean, that's the power of the media, the power of the press to go out there and to be uh, to fight what is happening. But as you pointed out, there are people who voted for Trump and believe in Trump. And as we have been talking about this for many years now, since before Trump, before Biden, when Trump's first administration, we kept saying, there are Asian Americans and Filipinos who support Trump, and
Yeah.
every time there's something incredible that he does, something that's out of the norm, we always turn to our friends and say, now, are you ready to see that this guy is nuts? And every time that happened, from the first administration, to now, we kept saying that, and people do not budge. They they
No,
they they dig
yeah,
in.
the reason, the way that we've been able to deal with that extreme frustration that we've been feeling for nearly a decade now, or maybe more than a decade at this point.
Mhm.
But the reason we're able to deal with it is that we have a sense of humor, and we can
Mhm.
actually dig deeply enough to laugh at the circumstances, despite the tragedy and the imminent catastrophe that is about to hit the United States of America. It's gonna
Yeah,
it's gonna get and I mean this sincerely, it's going to get deadly serious. Instead of one off, you're worried about this guy and being very observant, not only about his behavior but about where he puts his hands. Right? What he
Mhm.
does.
Yeah,
I know exactly the feeling, and I've actually been the victim of an assault and battery by a person who is mentally troubled. It
yeah.
happened years ago, like in the early '70s, but and I was attacked, and that attack occurred in a Catholic church,
Mm.
right in the middle
Yeah.
of San Francisco. Now, so I've ever since then I've been extremely wary about my
Yeah.
circumstances, and I try to have 360-degree vision. I don't think most people feel that way. I don't think people are thinking like that
Yeah.
in general terms, but on the right, and mostly on the right, I think there's a little bit of this on the left. It's not paranoia. It's they're very vigilant, right? And to
Mm.
the extent that they're well armed. And so the result is that we have a well armed population with a majority of the states being very permissive in terms of concealed carry. Okay.
Yeah.
We,
So so what? So
the,
you're saying that now that the pot is full of all the pepper, it's going to be hot. It's going to be hot.
it's, it's,
The future.
it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Just like what's happening in California with regard to the failure of schools, the inability of the state to support public education in an appropriate manner, that's been true ever since what, the early 70s, and
Yeah.
it got worse with the passage of Proposition 13, which has been dealt with as though it's immutable and not unreversible, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many facts to denounce 13 or to maybe overturn it. The political will isn't there, and it's like it has stayed as a almost like a monolith in terms of how taxation should run in California and what it should fund or what
Yep,
it doesn't
that's right.
fund,
That's right.
and it
And
doesn't fund schools.
well,
Yeah.
it was the easiest. People ask me, students ask me all the time, why I pick on education to cut budgets and all that. I said it's the easiest cut. Any of the other areas get too much reaction, and not enough
Yeah.
reaction with regard to public schools.
Well, isn't it funny that those are the places that the Doge people are they're going after USAID, which is like just like a drop in the bucket, but it's something that riles up people. Oh, we're not gonna give money to foreign countries, and they don't realize the importance of USAID as a as a tool, as a diplomatic tool, as a humanitarian tool,
They don't
and
really care. They don't really care. They there's a large segment of American society that is both ignorant, okay, and determinedly ignorant of the
yeah.
relationships between the United States and the rest of the world. They only worry about it when something really drastic happens, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
and it's not just that they don't care. Well, care is a key word, but they don't feel a sense of responsibility. They don't feel a sense of the philanthropy to aid people who are in trouble. I mean, that's what USAID does. I mean, it may be billions of
well,
dollars, but it's not a criminal act. It's not a
doesn't it?
generosity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, yeah, but Mr. Doge called
Though,
it
yeah,
evil. He
Musk
called
thinks
it
it's a criminal
evil.
act. Well,
Yeah.
what's happening is that you see the attack on USAID, and it's almost like uh, we they want to turn all of America into Donald Trump, this scowling white man who is non-generous and not big but small, and that's what gets me.
I
It's
think
turning,
there are people who really identify with that. Just exactly what you just described. There are people who really identify with that. Okay.
yeah,
On the other hand, I think the majority of people that still support Trump, right, just
mhm,
they just dismiss the ugliness.
yeah.
They just
They just
dismiss the ugliness, and they say, look, what are they doing right now? They're saying they have let USAID go, okay, because they feel that, as you're putting it, they feel that we shouldn't be giving assistance to these other people, these other
Yeah.
countries. We shouldn't be involved there at all. Okay. So that's not only ignoring the diplomatic value, right? It's also
Mhm.
ignoring the very pragmatic value, okay? Because when people ask me about USAID, what I say very bluntly is, well, it's also a cover for State Department activity, and it's
Oh
also a
yeah.
cover. It's a cover for
Eh,
CIA,
yeah.
and
I
that's the
mean,
way a lot of other countries look at it.
right.
They understand that when they're accepting that aid, they're also accepting the presence of an American element within their country. Okay, and
Yeah.
so really strong left countries, right? Left
Mm,
and right, fascist
mm,
countries, as well as really strong sort of quasi-socialist countries that are still
mm.
developing, what we used to call the third world, right? They
Yeah.
have very nationalistic criticism against the United States, and that criticism is often legitimate.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
but
so,
that's the
that's
thing
why
about
white America can't stand the UN, because they
yeah.
got a bunch of little countries, there's over 200 countries, and the vast majority of them are critical of the United States for one reason or another. These
Yeah.
people
Well,
do not want to be aware of the basis of that criticism. They just don't want to hear criticism the same way they don't want to hear criticism of Trump, because
yeah.
in their
Yeah.
identification with Trump, you're criticizing me,
Yeah.
okay?
Well,
You're
here's the
criticizing
thing.
me.
Here's the thing about USAID. I mean, you point out something good, that it's a double-edged sword. It's both good aid and it's also could be considered bad aid because but the people who hate USAID should like it for the bad aid because it
Yeah,
actually
that's
does
right.
some of the dirty
That's
work
right.
that the CIA and
Yeah.
all the operatives try to do because it's it's like you are buying hearts and minds. You're going in there and you're positioning, you're softening the quote unquote target for your CIA operatives so that they know what to do. It's a nice. It's almost like the velvet glove around the iron fist of colonialism, right?
Well,
I mean
yeah,
that's what it
colonialism,
is.
neocolonialism. Yeah, I think that's fair. But see,
Now,
it's also once again, yesterday we left off by saying this is just part of a continuum. You can't
right?
see this stuff as suddenly arising because of Trump. Trump gave this, let's say, a positive. Trump was a nutritive, right,
Yeah,
ingredient in allowing this stuff to grow up to the surface, right? And what it
yeah.
exposes is the reality of American society and the way a large portion of Americans think. And so it's not as though that hasn't always been there. It is
Yeah,
part of a continuum, okay? And
right.
so here we are facing the same kind of criticisms from the right that we faced 50 years ago, 60 years ago. The same stuff, the same stuff. And so look at what happened in Vietnam, right? People
Mhm.
believe right up until the nasty withdrawal of the United States from Vietnam, nasty in the sense that it really left the South Vietnamese
Mhm.
open and vulnerable to slaughter. Okay,
Yeah.
and then remember the resistance to the arrival of the refugees. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah. Oh
how
yeah,
long
yeah.
that
The
took.
the boat people.
Sure, they were. Yeah, well, the reason there were boat people was because the United States did not want to admit Vietnamese refugees into the
Yeah.
country at all.
Yeah.
Okay, only a few, the pre-vote boat people, right? Only a few that escaped immediately after the fall of what used to be Saigon, right?
Yeah.
After
Well,
the fall of Saigon, only those few arrived in the United States proper. Okay,
right.
and
Right.
the rest went to all of remember the camps,
Oh yeah.
huge freaking refugee
But
camps.
Dan, before we get off on Vietnam, Vietnam is important because there was a groundswell of anti-Vietnam sentiment that changed policy. And
Yeah, but look how
if
long
we're
it took. That was my point.
well, this is the thing. If we want to see something change policy wise, what is it going to take to bring out the people to
Mass
say,
action. Yeah, that's right. That's
yeah,
right.
I
Mass
mean, because
action. First,
that's what it was. I
yeah.
mean, you touched on it by bringing up Vietnam. We changed,
Well, I
you
wanted to
changed that
draw a
discussion.
parallel. I wanted to draw a parallel with what's going on
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
Then we were at war, and then even though we were getting information about the reasons for the failures, right,
mhm,
of the American military in Vietnam, um, people wanted to blame the military, right down to the people on the ground, were blaming the politicians, okay, rather than blaming the military strategy itself. The politicians were at fault, but the reason they were at fault, right, was because they were so wholly supportive of the military effort in Vietnam. They kept on throwing. Remember how bad it got? At first they were just saying we're going to escalate by putting in more troops. We're going to do
Yeah.
carpet bombing, and then they even
Yeah.
did carpet bombing into Cambodia over the Vietnam border. Right? They did all of that,
Yeah.
then they resorted to biochemical warfare, and they denied that it was happening. They said, "Oh no, the only thing that we're using is this stuff that's a defoliant. It's a defoliant, so it
Uh,
doesn't
A-
have inhumane efforts on the people."
Agent Orange. All right, but you know, the people who it was killing, it wasn't just killing the Vietnamese, it was killing our
Yes, it
soldiers.
was.
And and I think maybe that's where we have to get to, where when the American people feel like they are losing because of Trump and Musk, that's when you'll see the
I agree.
popular,
I agree.
yeah, popularity is already fading
Yeah,
for Musk, but when will it start to affect Trump,
you have
and
to have both.
when will we
You
see?
have to have both. You have to have
Huh?
massive organization on the one hand and mass action, right?
Yeah,
And some of that is already happening
I
on at the state
but
level.
what is the thing that's going to do it? I mean, so far, they're dumping on trans people, they're dumping on USAID. I think it might be dumping on federal workers, because here's the thing: a lot of these federal workers, they're just regular middle
They're
class
the deep
people. Some
state.
of
They're
them
the
may have
deep
even voted.
state, dude. They're the deep state.
Right, but some of them may have even voted for Trump. That's the thing. And you know, we're talking about millions that just going to lop off, and only because they want to change this idea that a public servant has to be not just a good public servant to the Constitution, but even above that, you have to be a servant to the president, which is anathema to any democracy loving person, career government official. But I think when you start seeing middle class people start taking it to the streets and talking about, hey, I'm being threatened by the government, I'm being thrown out in the street, I'm homeless. When you start hearing stories like that, I'm a federal worker, I've always put the people of the United States first, not a king, not a monarch. When you start seeing real people tell their stories, I think maybe things
I
change.
think
What do
I
you
think a
think?
certain percentage of people will be affected by that. Okay, but you're once again, you're showing your god awful humanitarian colors. Okay, you, I've been saying all along that very few there are fewer people who think that way in American society than in any time in my lifetime, including the period
Hmm.
when racial segregation was still the law of the land. Even then, even
Hmm.
with the racism, even with the misogyny, even with all of that, there were more people who had a humanitarian sense of America. Okay, remember the big issues
Hmm.
were things like capital punishment. Is this legitimate? People were talking about Carol Chessman's case, right? And they,
Right. Oh, Carol Chessman, you're going way
well,
back.
yeah, but I'm,
That
I'm
he's
trying to make
he's
a point. People were thinking in a more humanitarian way. They were looking at they
yeah.
were Ken Kesey, Cuckoo's Nest, right? People.
What happened to us,
The,
Dan? Why did we become less
well,
humanitarian?
number one, individualism. Number one, individualism. Consumerist society, right? What does
Mm.
that end up
Yeah.
doing? In order to squarely understand yourself and identify with the middle class, which was all things great, right? To be middle class, all right,
Mm.
all things great.
Mm. Mm.
You have the correct, let's say, balance between a home life, particularly the ability to rent and live where you want to live, or even yet, what's the standard, right? The little house with a white picket fence. Now,
Mm.
of course, that's a kind of a fantasy. I mean, it's real for some people, but at least being able to afford a home. That's the major defining element of the middle class. Right now, you're seeing a majority of Americans unable to even acquire that. Okay, but
Mm. Mm.
they're still not identifying the issue as being a capitalist, consumer oriented economy. They still don't make the connection, right? So what how can they move? It's really obvious that they're being shut out of what the standard was for a middle class existence in American society, but they're blaming it on the politicians rather than looking at it systemically. There's part of the problem. Okay, that's part of the problem. The other thing is, I brought up individualism. They look at it as though this is the way it's affecting me. And then they look outside and they see other people also similarly affected, and so they build a sense of community in that regard. But everybody in that community doesn't understand how the system really works, and so they attack the politicians, and they attack not the politicians who caused the problem, but the politicians that they want to blame because they're listening to the politicians who caused the problem and all of their lies, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're not half truths. They're not exaggerations. They are lies. They're outright
Yeah.
lies, and they're believing it.
So right. Yeah. So right now, I get the sense that some people, because it's almost like a 50-50 country. People voted for Trump, people didn't vote for Trump. I think some people aren't who voted for Trump aren't yet alarmed to the point where there's a massive you know uh, exodus from MAGA
Yeah,
land. They're hanging in there
yeah,
with
they
him,
have to. They
but
have to.
but
They
the
don't. They're not going to eat the last 10 years of their lives or longer. Okay, it's not just
yeah.
about Trump. They're invested in all of the fantasy that we were taught from the time we were children. Right? What's American
Mhm.
society? It's a free, open society, and the economy is based on laissez-faire. Right? Let people compete.
Mhm.
Right? With products and services, let them compete, and the people who render the best products and services will be the ones that rise above. Okay, that laissez-faire, small government, no regulation or very little regulation, right? And then people will,
Well,
businesses will rise because they have the best products, the best services. Okay.
eh,
Now,
yeah,
when did
but
you realize that
Trump.
when did you realize that was BS?
Yeah, well, Trump isn't very laissez-faire when he wants to talk about tariffs. He's not laissez-faire when he's closing up the
No,
borders.
no,
He's not
I'm not saying
laissez-faire.
Trump is. Trump is going to contradict
Yeah.
himself. Give him 10 seconds in between statements and he'll contradict
Oh
himself.
yeah, yeah,
Okay?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you have to take
yeah.
Trump off the table. You have to say, okay, why do people invest in Trump? Okay? And it's not just about Trump. They're invested in the American fantasy, the American fantasy of exceptionalism. They're invested in that. Okay? Uh, Laissez-faire means, hey, a free, open economy, open competition. When did you? I asked you a direct question. When did you realize that was
Yeah.
BS?
Oh, maybe first job, second job. I
Okay,
mean,
okay, and what?
yeah. I mean,
So what about that experience in your first or second job led you to
well,
understand that that fantasy of laissez-faire was just
well,
mythology?
it's not as open. It's not as open for people for a lot of people. It's not open. It is. There you don't have glass ceilings for nothing, right? And a glass ceiling is a protection. It's a prophylactic against success for certain types of people. And that's when I realized it wasn't laissez-faire. It's not. It's not. It Yeah, and it's easy to see Trump as being protectionist for his people, for the people who view him as their savior. And I'm talking about white alpha male who does not want to see the end of that kind of dominance. And that's what Trump
When
represents to
when you
me.
were a kid, did you ever question why it was apparent that only white people held certain kinds of jobs?
No, it didn't, but uh, it was apparent that when I got into college and people were talking corporate and people were talking, oh, they're going to business school. I never thought about business because my father was a worker. My father, I didn't know what a corporation was even, or the need for a corporation. And when you grow up in a mindset where, the corporation is just something outside of your life, and that your life is just your dad and mom, maybe, but mostly it was dad who comes in and has the paycheck and divvies it up and buys the food and pays the rent. That's a very limited world, but that's a world that the corporates don't see. And that wasn't a world that I saw, grew up with. And later when I realized, oh, it's because I was living in my world of limitations, and it wasn't self-imposed. It was imposed upon us.
Yeah, it was. You started thinking that it is systemic or it's structural.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, this is America, right?
There-
This is You don't really understand what capitalism is. And I thought, all right, I'm a journalist. When I work for a big company, um, I'll expose all these things. I'll talk about these things. And then I remember when I started working for my first nonprofit news organization, a person came up to me and said, "Oh, so are you tired of working your corporate journalism job?" I didn't see that there was a difference, but clearly there was. Clearly there
yeah,
was. I thought, oh, yeah, I'm just doing journalism, and that's why I'm wearing the official uniform of the corporates. I'm wearing the business suit because of the people I talk to or the people that I have to deal with. Um, but that just goes to show you how if you're not exposed or if you don't have an understanding of this, because of either school or because of whatever insight you might have, sometimes it just takes a while for it to, like, oh, that's why that is the way it is.
yeah.
Anyway,
For
so
you know, for,
so
for for
so
me, for me, very briefly, for me, it was being outside of the neighborhoods that we were allowed to live in. All of the neighborhoods that we were
oh
allowed to
yeah,
live in was the east side of San Francisco. You could run a ruler right down the middle of San Francisco, starting with the Visadero, right, at the marina,
yeah,
or at the Embarcadero or the
mhm,
marina, and you could take a ruler and go right down the middle. And on the east side was where all of the people of color were concentrated very heavily, right? And on the side,
mhm,
it was white. And it was white because of a thing called racial covenants. Okay. I didn't understand racial covenants until I was in high school. Okay, because there were a lot of lawsuits
yeah,
going on by the early 1960s. Some of them had occurred as early as the mid 50s, right? In South San Francisco, for
yeah,
example. But I didn't learn that until I was in college. What I knew was there
yeah,
was this clear dividing line between the East and West in San Francisco. And then what I saw was on the West side, there were these little small businesses, right, run by Chinese, right? Little small stores run by Chinese, places where you could get candies and 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 sodas. And remember all those wax things, like wax,
oh
yeah,
yeah,
wax pickles. You know, you could get malted milk balls, right, and all that kind of those little ice
yeah.
cream confections and all that stuff. Really small
I
stuff.
remember those
Tiny
stores.
bottles of soy sauce, right? Those kind of
Yeah,
Chun King soy sauce. Anyway, you remember the kind of places, right? And so my
yeah,
question was, if these people can run these kind of stores, why is it that only white people run these other stores? And then remember when they started
yeah.
building up and they actually came up with this concept, supermarkets, right? Not
Oh
just
yeah,
local
yeah,
market,
yeah,
but a supermarket, right? And then all of a sudden, you raised corporatizing. They weren't franchises; they were
yeah,
corporate, right? And they got
yeah,
huge.
yeah,
And one of the first ones was Safeway, of course. Okay, and so why
yeah,
is it that it's only like white people that own these things? And then when we go to Chinatown, you can see that Chinese run these big old supermarkets, right? In up and down,
yeah.
on Northern
Well,
Grant, and so why is it that they can't run those markets, outside of China? What I discovered was there were Chinese running large markets, but they were outside the city. They were in Oakland,
oh yeah,
right?
yeah,
They were in the East Bay, they were
yeah,
in the suburbs, they were in Oakland, and that's the only place where they could do it. So what could they do? What were they allowed to do? Restaurants, laundries, right? Right? And those little dinky stores.
yeah,
That was it.
yeah,
That's why I
yeah.
questioned
I,
it. I
I mean,
questioned
that's
it from the start. Why? What is that?
yeah. Well, so all right. So now we have different generations. We have three, four generations of Asian
who
Americans that
have
are
been
seeing
very
this happening
successful.
now. Right. And then we also have new generations of Asian Americans coming in just within the last 20 years. And some of them are Trumpers.
Yes.
And some of them are seeing what's happening now. And you got to figure that there's got to be a sense of conflict because part will want to have that self-preservation. Yes, I'm with Trump. And a lot of them will see, oh, well, they might side with a more humane perspective of politics in terms of USAID, in terms of, the 14th Amendment and you know, uh, childbirth citizenship, all the issues that DEI, all the issues that Trump is raising. So to get back on track, how do we fight this? Well, first of all, you wanted to talk about who's going to enforce, who's going to be the guardrail to keep people, to keep Trump
Okay.
honest. Is there anyone
Okay.
to keep Trump honest?
Okay. I'm going to make
Because it doesn't look like
I'm going
there
to make a
is.
connection. First of all, you're right about the new incoming people, being more easily inclined, right, to support Republicans and to support specifically Trump. Okay, um, that
Mhm.
that comes because they have no understanding of like the civil rights movement, okay, or the real
Yeah,
purpose and process of affirmative action, which is now labeled as DEI. Okay, so they know none
right.
of that, and they don't think they need that. And so, what they're interested in
Mhm.
doing is engaging the system in the way that they see opportunity, right? Because that's what everybody describes
Mhm.
America as. It's a land of opportunity. They now have examples of success, right? You've got
Yeah,
leaders of major corporations that are second generation Americans. Okay, look how many of them actually stood on the podium. Two of them stood
yeah,
on the podium, right? Running for the Republican nomination, and it's like,
yeah,
wow, what, from zero
yeah. Yeah. Well,
to
hey,
people running
look,
for the
one of the top.
nomination Republican Party. So that is evidence that we can succeed in American society.
Yeah.
They're going to want to do that. The problem is that the younger generation that are second, third, fourth generation, maybe longer, right, are suddenly
Mhm.
realizing that they cannot attain what their parents attained. That is
Uh,
real right now. Okay. And so in
so when you have a parent who succeeds on that level, is running for RNC chair or whatever, or Viet Din, the guy who was on the Fox board and then was later dumped when they got the lawsuit or the libel suit, uh, their kids aren't as successful. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but I'm not
The
talking about the cream that made it really big, that became billionaires. I'm talking about the people down on the ground that were able to succeed in,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
getting a what we call the traditional middle class position. That's why I was describing home
Oh yeah,
ownership, right? So now
yeah.
this current generation that has just graduated from college, I'd say for the last 2 or 3 generations, and I'm measuring that by every 5 years, right? Every 5 or 6 years,
Mm,
new group of people graduating from college, they can't even get the job that they thought they were going to be able to get. Okay,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then the people who did get the job can't afford to live in the city. Okay, so
yeah.
they're not able to live anywhere near what their parents were able to succeed. Look, my father
Are,
was a civil service
yeah.
custodian, a civil service janitor,
Hmm.
right? Right. But he
Hmm.
was able to achieve a middle class status with a middle class paycheck, right? That was higher than my
Hmm.
mother's free enterprise paycheck because she worked for a
Yeah,
corporation. She worked for a
yeah,
corporate clothier company. Okay, and so
yeah.
they were able to attain that quite easily, even in a racist environment. Racism told them where they could buy a house, where they could live. Okay, but the economy
Mm,
allowed them to at least be able to participate. Right now, okay, with less racism, supposedly, right, and less misogyny,
mm.
and a greater degree of freedom, they can't afford to live a middle class existence.
Yeah, it's
High
harder. Yeah.
level of frustration,
Well,
high level of distrust of both parties, a high level of distrust of all of government. Okay. And it's legitimate and it's logical. Okay. That's where you
yeah,
organize.
and it
That's
almost
where you can
and
organize.
and that so. you talk. So those are the people within the Asian American community. Those people. But
No, we don't
you mentioned your
within all
dad
communities. The
within
whole,
all.
everybody under 35, man, 30 years old, they're
Right.
really
All
frustrated.
right. So right, it's got to be, but still, the demographic is
Yeah.
35
It,
and
it's
under,
it's it's age
and not
it's
35
age and
plus,
class.
not the
It's
35.
age and class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What about, I still think that with the deadline looming for federal employees on Monday, there's got to
I think that's
be
going to
a
help.
rise
I agree with
in.
you. I think that when you see massive unemployment and you see people being disposed, but that's the humane perspective. Oh no, so many people are suffering, right? Why are they suffering? You're asking them to be humane, and I'm telling you, individualism, they don't care about that. It's about me.
Yeah.
Am I getting
All right.
fired?
But
Am
then
I
if you
getting laid
take,
off?
but if you take USAID and you point to people who are actually dying because of a failure of
Yeah.
USAID, dying, I mean that's a real thing. There are babies dying, there are people getting malaria, all these things that were, from dysentery that we
You
solved,
know,
people are getting
when it was just North Africa and it was
Mhm,
Quincy Jones and Stevie Wonder coming up with and Lionel Richie, right, coming up with "We Are the
mhm,
World."
yeah.
Okay, why was that
Mhm,
successful? One, because the economy was really good. Okay, two, because it was a small area that people were focused on. Now, was there starvation, right? And savagery, butchery going on elsewhere in the world, even elsewhere in Africa?
mhm,
Absolutely. But what the media did was they focused on that one thing. Okay. Why? Because all kinds of musicians, right? Popular musicians from all fields, jazz, rock, R&B, right? They focused on it, right? And so it got to be a popular thing. But it was easy to deal with in the sense that it was focused and people, people would identify with that. And the humane factor was active. Okay. The humanitarian factor was active. Nowadays, because of the widespread feeling of frustration, economic frustration, particularly, right? Okay, it is
mhm,
not
mhm.
a ripe environment for humane thinking about what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Okay, all right. So humane isn't going to do it. What's going to do it is people getting angry because they're being cut
Yes,
off.
it has to
They're
get them at the
being
individual level. It has to affect me. That's the kind of world we live in today. And it's not just the United
it's
States.
self
It's
yeah,
not just the US.
it's selfish. Yeah. All right. So
Okay,
what
so we
about
moved from that to, gee, the Democrats are doing something right. They woke up. People saying they woke up. Okay, watch out for that woke thing. But they're now conscious and aware, and they're starting to act. So they're protesting, right? But a lot of the protests
yeah.
are happening at the state level. I love that. Okay, it's localized. It's something that we can trust. Okay, rather than stuff
Mhm.
being local to Washington D.C. and watching Schumer, doing his fake. Oh man, that was so
Yeah.
disgusting. Standing there, we will win, we will win, and they were really weak. They were really weak when they said it,
Well,
and it was like, wow, man,
what
this is a bunch of octogenarians trying to protest, and they're not doing a good job. Okay. On the other hand,
yeah.
you have people like Schacht, that are competent, that are saying we're going to file a
Mhm.
bunch of lawsuits, and that's what they're doing. On when this stuff was happening, I called one of my lawyer friends that's recently retired, and I said, "Okay, what can we do?" He said, "Not much. People are already telling me or asking me where else they can look for a job," and that was not the right answer. The
Yeah.
answer that I wanted was injunctive relief. We're going to sue the hell out of them and look for injunctive relief all the way down the line, because I felt that
It's
was the correct immediate response. Okay, um,
yeah.
okay, now here we go. We got some injunctive relief. We got a couple of federal judges that said you can't do that. Okay, and
Right.
that's gonna work all the way down the line in terms of protecting federal jobs. Okay, here's my question. Okay, so what if you win injunctive relief? So what if you shut it down completely and you say you can't just fire these people. You got to show cause. Okay, you got to show cause.
Mm.
That's real. That's all real. Okay, so then that brings it down to the individual level. So they're not going to have the capacity to go one by one through all of these people and say, there we have legitimate cause, right, to fire you. Okay, they're
Mm.
just not, they don't
Mm.
have the capacity to be able to do that, so it's going to get stuck there in court for a long time. Here's my ultimate question is, who the hell is going to enforce that when when Trump people, like the people who are now working under the cover of Doge and who are invading all of the
Mm-hmm.
institutions, and they're about to take on education, right? They want to wipe that out entirely, like
Right.
USAID. They want to do the same treatment there. Okay, who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop them? Who's going to stand in their way and say, you gotta leave it alone, get out of here? Who's going to enforce that? Then if they still force the issue, who's going to arrest them and who's going to prosecute them? That is my question.
Uh, so the FBI, the Cash Patel,
What's left of the FBI? Yep, Cash Patel.
Cash Patel. I mean, no, I think you're going to see, we might see federal employee uprising because, especially in Washington, if they concentrated on Washington, um, I mean, these are civil servants. Um, they should be treated better, and they're getting lawyered up, and they're the suits. I think you're going to see more of it. But I think when they show how loud they can be, I think we might begin to see some kind of movement or some kind the real pushback. All right, so Dan, in the time remaining, I called you yesterday because I saw this news story come up late, and it impacted me. We're both Filipino. I'm Filipino. Rob Bonta, Filipino American, is the AG, which is a role that usually catapults people to national prominence.
Hmm.
We were thinking maybe, a few months ago, that maybe he'd run for governor. He had expressed some interest, but now it seems like maybe he's being slightly big-footed because he's withdrawn from the gubernatorial race, or he's saying that he's not considering it now. What do you think's happening?
Well, you know, you intimated, and I think some of the articles that have been written about this issue intimate that he's being pressed out potentially by Ms. Harris. Okay, who could
Hmm.
very? I think she could be very successful if she ran for governor. Okay, um, and I would have preferred that you stayed in the freaking Senate, but that's just me. Okay, um, and
Yeah.
not have taken on.
I do
Yeah,
too. I think she would have been better
yeah,
in the
she should
Senate,
have
but
stayed there. But anyway, because Biden's behavior, he's going to lose anyway. Okay, he got out too soon, too late rather, and all that. But anyway, the point is that
mm,
Rob is qualified for all kinds of things, and he's still young enough that he has the potential to go the judicial route. Okay, he has the potential. I think the Senate is locked up for a while. Being a senator from California is locked up for a while because Padilla is not that old, you know, and
no,
Schiff just got in. I mean, he's freshman.
yeah,
He's a freshman senator,
yeah,
so that's going to be locked up for a while. But there's also the possibility of a cabinet position in a successful democratic regime beginning in 28.
yeah,
Okay, and then he could move from that cabinet position back to California the way Harris is doing and go for governor. Then if he wants to, he could also go for the Senate. Okay, in sometime in the future. He's young enough. Okay, he's really good at a lot of stuff. He's really smart, and
yeah. Well, I just think it's
it is
disappointing
disappointing.
that he gets pushed out. I don't know if he's pushed out, but he wants to leave the way open. He's playing good
Yes,
Democrat.
he is. I agree
He's a
with that. I
political.
think that's a good analysis.
He's a good political. He's a good political player. So I just think that it was good to see someone like him be be poised to do something good. And of course, we thought maybe Harris would be, in a different
Yeah,
position,
yeah.
but
If
now
she
she's
had
not.
made
And
it as president, we'd be talking a
yeah,
different story. You know.
yeah. All right. So now I guess the last thing I want to mention is the Super Bowl's coming up. My heart isn't in
Yeah.
it. I feel it's too escapist. I feel like it's not like, oh, we have had so much, you know,
Negative.
chaos in the last
Yeah.
couple of weeks. We need the break. I don't think so. I think I think it's okay if you skip this. It's okay if you just turn off all your screens, all your devices, and maybe just meditate a little bit. I think that's what I like. That's what I want. The football, not my
You're not
heart's
gonna
not in.
miss the vegan chicken wings. You're not gonna miss that.
No, the vegan chicken wings are just loaded with fat, and actually, I like my off Broadway diet, which is just I find a good Chinese joint I like, and I say, oh, I'll take the pea sprouts, and I'll take some greens, and a little bowl of rice, and that's it. I mean, I eat very simple, or maybe go to have some rice and beans at there's a number of burrito places here in in where I am here in New York. But I was just talking to some guy from Texas who says, there's one thing I'm not going to do in New York City, and that's buy a Mexican burrito or buy a burrito. And well, burritos are kind of California, right? It's not
Yeah.
really a
It
Mexican
was a
thing.
California invention, basically.
It's a California invention. So anyway, no, I'm not going to miss the chicken wings, but I think I'm just not. I'm not going to partake.
Yeah,
I
the
don't
guy
really
that said
care
he
for.
wasn't going to buy, burrito or Mexican food in New York. Okay,
Yeah,
way back in 1990, I took my son out to New York for his first trip out there, and we were going to hang out
yeah,
with Jessica Hagedorn, the writer, for a while and all that. And so late
yeah,
one night, we went to some jazz clubs in the Greenwich, right? And so we came up out of the
mhm,
clubs because they close at 3:30. Okay, so we came up out of the
yeah.
clubs, and I'm looking desperately for a restaurant because I got the munchies, right? And so, what's open? A Mexican joint, and it was a well reputed Mexican place, semi formal.
Yeah.
It wasn't a fast food joint, and all
Oh,
that. Yeah,
at 3:30,
yeah,
huh?
at 3:30 in the
At
freaking
three.
morning, man. I guess they were pretty much 24/7. But so we went there, and the food was really good. It didn't miss a
Eh,
trick. It tasted just like I was eating
Yeah.
on Mission Street, here in San
Hey,
Francisco
look,
or in LA,
New
wherever.
York has New York has great food. Great food. One thing though that I pride myself in, I've been here a while, and I have not had a slice of pizza yet. That 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 is like a badge of
Yeah,
honor
yeah,
of
yeah,
mine.
you're not
I've
gonna do
resisted.
it. No,
I've resisted pizza, calzone, because I'm a
yeah, yeah,
vegan.
yeah.
And even if you gave me a vegan pizza, I don't think I'd want it. I want to stay away from the fat. I want to stay away from the fat, because I'm learning that the fat content in your food, if you go over 30 grams of fat in a day, that's not so great for your A1C, for all your vital numbers. And I've managed to just stay vegan while I'm here, just hitting juice bars and not overeating, and walking. You walk everywhere in New
Does
York. You just got to walk everywhere.
halal,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
falafel,
yeah. There's
that's,
yeah.
does that qualify as vegan?
Uh, Not if it's
No,
meat.
no,
If it's
yeah,
halal
no.
meat, it's just.
Falafel with
But
no meat in
but
it,
ha-
you know?
there's some halal stuff that is vegan. Vegan just means no
That's
dairy,
right,
no
that's right.
animal.
Well, yeah,
Um,
but yeah,
and so it's hard because there's like these soup dumplings, but they don't make soup dumplings except with pork soup. So I can't eat the
that's where
soup
the flavor
dumplings,
comes
and
from.
they're
Flavor comes
yeah.
from the pork.
But they could make vegetarian pho. They can make
Yeah, they do.
they can
Yeah,
do different
yeah.
things.
We
Anyway,
look for
so
it.
anyway, Dan, Nico Remijo for the Kansas City Chiefs. If you're going to watch the Super Bowl, see if Nico does anything cool. He went to Cal, transferred to Fresno State. He's Filipino in the Super Bowl, so I'll watch for that.
Yeah.
But
You know, what you can do is you can have it
yeah,
on and then, practice yoga, do,
oh yeah,
that kind of thing. And, you know,
yeah,
sometimes I read a book or I'll have my laptop open and I'll read some headlines, or yeah, something else so that the TV is just on, you know. And then
yeah,
so if
yeah,
anything big happens, you can catch that. You can always, rewind and if you missed it and catch it. So that's probably the way we're
yeah.
gonna go. And I'm gonna
All
do the
right.
vegan chicken wings anyway. I mean,
Okay. All right. All right. Look, vegan
you know
chicken
what the
wings,
secret
they're all
is?
right.
You got to use a
What?
vinegar-based dip. That's the secret.
Use yeah,
It's like
good sauce,
that's
good
right.
dip. Yeah,
I call it the
yeah.
chicharron method. Like if you're gonna
To try.
eat chicharron, you better have vinegar
Yeah.
because that stuff is going to go into your veins, like used motor oil.
Yeah. All
So
right.
so you got to do it. So if you have a nice vinegar dip, like apple cider based vinegar dip,
That's it.
that sucker will do.
Vinegar's
That
on
that
the
yeah,
Sinigang approach,
that's a good one. That's a good
the
one.
datu puti approach.
The dato pote,
Datu puti.
dato pote.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just that it means, you know what that means? That means white chief.
Yes,
I don't know.
I know. Datu
That's
puti.
white chief, man. What really?
All right, Dan.
Don't you got some nationalistic freaking vinegar, man? Couldn't you
Datu.
pick a
Hey,
more nationalistic brand?
it's
Yeah.
anti-colonial.
Then it,
Anti-colonial vinegar.
well, yeah, the Chinese Filipino brand name is then White Swan. Why is there all this stuff? Why is everything gotta be white, man?
White vinegar. It's not, it's not brown.
Oh
It's a white
no!
vinegar.
Oh no! That's why I use apple cider.
Oh yeah, yeah. All right, Dan.
All right,
Hey, take
man.
care, man. And we'll see you.
Yeah.
Good luck. Good luck watching the Super Bowl with your vegan chicken
Yeah,
wings.
yeah, no, and we're gonna try and have at least 2 or 3 vegan meals over the weekend, so it's gonna be good.
Good,
It's
good.
gonna be
I
fun.
mean, and
All right,
just
man.
stay away from the fat. Stay away from the fat. Oh,
I'll try.
okay. And there he goes, Daniel Phil Gonzalez, my friend, College of Ethnic Studies, Asian American Studies. We try to keep these now under 3 hours. We and so even though we're actually trying to keep this under an hour, the fact that we're like an hour and 2 minutes, I mean, it's just we had a lot to say. We had a lot to say. Dan, I know Dan Alon, he has a lot to say. College of Ethnic Studies, Asian American Studies, San Francisco State University professor emeritus. And there's a lot, he has a point. But what's going to bring on the change? It's not going to be Brian Schatz, right? The guy from Hawaii. It's not, talking for 30 hours. I mean, that's a nice stunt. But I don't know. Did you get riled up about it? I mean, where would you see that? I mean, unless you're watching C-SPAN, maybe some news coverage, but I guess they're building up. They're building up. But I think when you get the federal workers into this, I think you'll start seeing some public uprising. You need people coming up saying, "Hey, Donald Trump, stop that." Because he responds to polls. He responds to public pressure. He responds to people's voices. Which brings me back to the story I started initially. People are riled up. I went to an open mic earlier today, and this guy was there and said, I never done an open mic before. I got to do an open mic. Donald Trump made me do it. What he's doing? I'm upset with this. And everyone in the open mic said, yeah, you got some jokes? Let's hear them. And the guy just was not joking. He wasn't like being a comedian. He was saying he was God. And we all thought, oh, we're going to have a school shooting here. We're in this open mic in the Greenwich Village. And fortunately, it didn't happen. We were ready to tackle him. All right, tonight I'm going to be at the Shine Challenge soon, shortly. 8 o'clock is the show. If you're in New York City, the Lower East Side, still time. Get tickets. There it is. Theater for the New City on First Avenue, excuse me, First Avenue and 10th Street, between 9th and 10th, and the Lower East Side, or excuse me, East Village, not the Lower East Side. Lower East Side, a little lower. This is more the Village. And okay, that's it. Hey, enjoy your weekend. We'll be repeating some shows, I think. Catch this show on the YouTube channel. Catch it on AMOK. No, not AMOK.com. Catch it on Facebook, fb.com/Emil Guillermo. Also on X. Still on X. I'm still on X, but I don't get the blue check mark. I don't get the blue check mark. All right. That's it. I like to close with a little loving kindness, a little metta, a little meditation. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal Kita.